What's
Hey,
up?
What's up? What's up?
What's up? What's up? What's up?
All right, in the building. What up, fam? What's going
Kim.
on? Hey, Kim. What's going on?
what's happening? What's happening? Everybody's in the digital building here. Yeah, just trying to figure out what all this voter suppressionist activity is about.
Yeah, we're gonna go into.
Yeah, what about it? Huh? A lot going on. Yeah, like, share, subscribe to ETM Media. Do all of that. We got a crazy, amazing show for you tonight. We're going to talk about the voter suppressionism going on. We're also going to touch on the California Reparations Task Force last meeting again. We're also going to do the in the news, I think, too. So stay tuned.
Yes, we are.
All right. Speaking of in the news, let's do it.
All right, rest in power to the one and only Biz Markie, Marcel Theo Hall, born April 8th, 1964, transitioned on July 16th, 2021, known professionally as Biz Markie, was an American rapper, singer-songwriter, DJ, and record producer. Markie was best known for his 1989 single, Just a Friend, which became a top 40 hit in several countries. In 2008, Just a Friend made number 100 on VH1's list of the 100 greatest hip-hop songs of all time. Other hip-hop classics were Make the Music with Your Mouth, Biz, Nobody Beats the Biz, Vapors, which is one of my favorites, hip-hop classics, and Pickin' Boogers. Biz also appeared briefly in the music video for Rob Bass's single, It Takes Two. Upon Biz's death, a statement from a representative for the family was reported by ABC News and reads as follows. He leaves behind a wife, many family members, and close friends who miss his vibrant personality, constant jokes, and frequent banter. We respectfully request privacy for his family as they mourn their loved one. Fans wish their family the best during this difficult time.
Ashe Biz Markie. Did it say anything about how he passed?
No, I haven't heard anything.
Well, rest in power. All right. South Africa's Ramaphosa calls for unity amid wreckage of unrest. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has joined post-riot cleanup efforts as his government warned against vigilantism and sought to avert racial conflict following days of unrest. The country was gripped by more than a week of chaos in which more than 200 people were killed as looters ransacked shopping centers and rioters torched key industrial infrastructure and blocked trade routes. The violence was one of the worst post-apartheid South African and was sparked after former President Jacob Zuma was sentenced to 15 months in jail on July 8th for snubbing a corruption inquiry. The protests widened into grievances over long-standing poverty and inequality. His trial for corruption in a separate case is due to resume on Monday.
Cuban Americans say shortages don't explain protests. Cuban Americans have heard the word libertad or liberty at protests for decades. Now it's being shouted in Cuba, and they say the world should pay attention. While Cubans express anger over shortages in food and medicine, rising inflation, and power outages amid the challenges of COVID-19, many of the chants throughout the island call for political change and include expressions such as libertad, we want change, and down with the dictatorship. Cuba has been run by a communist government with a strong grip on society for over 6 decades. Though the government has received praise for its ability to offer primary care to its population, it also determines many aspects of people's lives, including wages, food, and internet prices, as well as their freedom of assembly, expression, and the ability to choose a president that does not belong to the Communist Party of Cuba. After the protests, Cuba's government announced it would temporarily lift restrictions on the amount of toiletries, food, and medicine that Cuban citizens can bring back home when they take foreign trips. But for many protesters on the island, it's a small concession compared to their demands and out of touch with their basic needs. Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel took some blame for the protests recently, saying failings by the government played a role, though he still says the United States is primarily at fault.
Some say this is where the United States is heading. Germany was warned about floods, but few communities took measures. The first precise warning that Germany was about to be hit by a violent storm likely to unleash a potentially deadly flood reached the country's meteorological service in the early hours of July 12th, nearly 3 days before disaster struck. Some local authorities heeded the warning and alerted their populations, potentially saving lives, but many others failed to do so before the flash floods hit Germany last Wednesday, killing over 160 and seriously injuring nearly 1,000 people. Officials say those numbers could increase as rescuers keep combing through destroyed homes. In those places, an over-reliance on digital tools such as warning apps meant to replace old-school sirens and public service announcements, the reluctance to order evacuations, and simply necredality about the immense of such a disaster were among the factors that stood in the way of preemptive response, experts and officials said. Some experts said the situation resembled that of the early days of the coronavirus pandemic, when some governments were late to take adequate action to ward off calamity no one had ever witnessed before.
Coco Gauff withdraws from Tokyo Olympics after testing positive for COVID-19. American tennis star Coco Gauff announced Sunday she has tested positive for COVID-19 and will withdraw from the upcoming Tokyo Olympics. The 17-year-old phenom announced she tested positive just before she was to leave for Tokyo. It's unclear at this time if she has been vaccinated.
Mask mandate returns to Los Angeles as coronavirus cases rise. Los Angeles County will reimpose its mask mandate this weekend in the latest sign that public health officials are struggling with an alarming rise in coronavirus cases tied to the highly contagious Delta variant. The county, home to 10 million people and the nation's second largest city, Los Angeles is one of several jurisdictions to recommend or mandate wearing masks or other pandemic restrictions in recent days as cases rise to worrisome levels in many parts of the United States. We're requiring masking for everyone while indoors at public settings and businesses, regardless of vaccination status, so that we can stop the increased level of transmission we're seeing, the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health and Public Health said on Twitter Thursday.
Pasadena to reinstate indoor mask rule require all city workers to be vaccinated. The city of Pasadena announced Monday it will reinstate an indoor mask rule for residents, regardless of vaccination status, and require all city employees to be vaccinated against the coronavirus. Pasadena officials say reinstatement of the indoor mask rule, which includes indoor dining except when eating or drinking, comes amid a significant increase in case rates. Over the last 3 weeks, city officials add that they've seen a 240% increase in COVID-19 cases since July 1st.
And reparations news has hit Fox News. Reparations legislation advocates push for new government commission, but short on specifics. In separate sit-down interviews with Fox News, Eleanor Holmes Norton, D.C., Wanika Fisher, and Maryland General Assembly delegate representing Prince George County, and Nikiti Taifa, a member of the National African American Reparations Commission, all voiced support for legislation to establish a commission to study reparations, but they offered few specifics when pressed on how they would implement such a compensation program. Reparations are an attempt to compensate for years of slavery, which put African Americans behind in wealth, education, and almost everything else that white Americans experienced when it came to this country simply for being white, Norton told Fox. This bill was written correctly without specifics because, to be frank, no one knows what we're talking about, who exactly we're talking about, and what form it should take, Norton said. No one knows off the top of their heads who would be eligible and why, Norton continued, and no one knows whether reparations is the appropriate remedy. That's what you need a commission for. Taifa, who has been active in reparations advocacy community for decades, said the privilege that white people in America enjoy is called white skin privilege, and that white Americans have benefited from a state and a social structure that is governed by white supremacy. She also agreed that a federal commission should decide reparations specifics.
Hey, do you mind if I?
Please do.
I was chopping at the bit to get in here, and I almost interrupted you, Kim. So sorry. And for everybody listening, hey, again, like, share, subscribe. This is ETM, right? We're giving you the end of news now. We got a bunch more to go through, but to say something quickly about this, first I have to just disagree with a lot of what I heard here from. I believe it's Taifa, and I want to say that with respect to Nkechi Taifa. And, you know, I'm obviously always willing to have dialogue and would love to have dialogue around this, but I have to disagree with a lot of what is quoted here. Maybe it's coming out of context, right? Because it's only like one-liners. So I want to give her the benefit of the doubt there. But this is something that I have to disagree with because it is not the way they are, or she is describing the questions around, hey, who's eligible, as if it's not knowable or not something that we don't have ideas about or really good thinking about right now. And the bill that she's talking about, HR 40, is actually not how she's describing it. It actually does have specifics, but it has language that's actually kind of confusing. So it has specifics that say one thing and then specifics in some cases that say something different. And I have to just, with full disclosure, stay here, but I do help manage the campaign to strengthen reparations legislation, what we call the Fix HR 40 and Fix S40 campaign. So I want you to know, in full disclosure, just keeping it real where I'm coming from. Part of my work is to help make sure that this bill that we're talking about, that she's talking about, HR 40 and its twin S40 in the Senate, to make sure that they're the strongest that they can be and get stronger than what they are right now. Right. So I have to disagree with a lot of what was said, and California is proving that. And we're gonna talk some more about that soon, right? So California is proving this now. So let me stop there.
You're absolutely correct. I mean, that's the same thing I was thinking as I was reading the article, but it does go back to the fact of, why we need a task force, and the task force is a good thing. Just get it in writing and make it legit. And that's in the news.
Great job, Kim. Shout out.
Great job, Kim.
I know there's some words in there that,
Yeah, I was like, some tongue twisters in there, but we get through it. We get through it.
You do, and great job to you, Moya, too. And by the way, we do want to give a shout out to our fourth co-host, CO. Shout out to you, CO, in the Southern California land. We'll see you soon. Just a big shout out to our fourth co-host, CO. Make sure you check back here on ETM. Every Tuesday, 9 p.m., we do the community call-in. And at some point in this conversation, we will have a call-in number on a crawl somewhere where you can actually call in and tell us what you're thinking about what we're talking about. Even if you have some thoughts about what was in the news, we want to hear from you. Okay.
Shout out to CO.
Shout out to CEO. So before we actually get into the topic of tonight, Chris, do you want to give a little rundown on the California Task Force and kind of some of the updates in a brief summary?
Brief enough. Because nothing with me is brief. Right. So yes, I do. And I want to do this because no one's done this. No one's done this yet, right? So I'm going to do this briefly enough, right, within a few minutes. No one's done this, though. No one's actually looked at what was discussed at the last California Reparations Task Force meeting last July 9th and actually said, hey, what actually happened? Can we actually talk about it like a little bit? There were 2 to 3 to 4 community engagement plans proposed, talked about, discussed, and then there was a plan for the meeting topics and what the task force's schedule would be. There was also some other things that happened that are important to talk about. So I want to just give folks who missed it and also who, maybe want to just talk about it again, some time to actually do that right now. Okay, ready, set, here we go. So the first thing to say is that the chair of the task force, Camilla Moore, actually presented a plan at the last meeting for how often the task force should meet and what they should talk about. But in the other parts of that plan, there were some things that were important that she talked about for community engagement, right? And this is all about how this task force is going to actually interact and communicate and engage with folks like me, you, and everyone who's watching and listening and is going to watch and is going to listen, right? So this is a lot of what this last meeting was about. We're in the beginning stages, of this process. So we're still figuring out, hey, what's the process going to look like? How many meetings are there going to be? What are they going to talk about? So a quick couple of points here. One, what the chair proposed was that all meetings and all public meetings be changed from 1 day to 2 days. Okay, so that's a important thing, right? That instead of doing the 1 day meetings, now they would do them all in 2 days. That way, more people can participate. You basically double the number of meeting hours, right? She also proposed that there be 5 hearings dedicated to information gathering, 5 of the remaining 9, 10 plus public meetings, that they be specifically about information gathering, and then 4 meetings dedicated to developing and preparing the proposals for reparations under the international standards and under the international law standards. And for those of you who don't know, the international law standards for reparations call for compensation, restitution, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and guarantees of non-repetition. Those are the 5 forms of reparations recognized by the United Nations and by the international community. So when we're talking about reparations, this is what we're talking about generally, but in our bill, AB 3121, there's actually specific language that says, hey, whatever you guys do in California, you people do in California, you have to match what the international standards call for, right? So you at least have to match these 5 forms, right? So that was what was proposed also. Interestingly enough, on the proposals part, the chair also proposed that there be proposals and calls for proposals ahead of every single public meeting of the task force. Okay, so that's a big deal, right? Every single meeting in this plan would have some proposals discussion around it. So how we've been saying, we don't want to just spend a bunch of time investigating, which we do have to, but then not discuss proposals, et cetera, for the next year or so. Well, this is a plan that says, hey, we're actually going to think about and talk about proposals at every single meeting of the California Reparations Task Force, the public meeting. So another big deal. All of the public meetings in this plan would include expert and public testimony, as well as public comment. Those are 3 different things: expert testimony, public testimony, and public comment. Okay, those are 3 different things. So all of the meetings would have a combination of all of those three things in them. And obviously all of this would be, to make community engagement, better, right? So like I said, the other big deal here was that every single meeting would have some proposals discussed around them. All right, I want to pause here. You Moya and Kim, do y'all have any questions about what I just said? And you in the chat, do you have any questions about what I just said as well? That was kind of creepy. I'm sorry. It's like all in the
y'all can call in too. 720-740-9699. Call in, family. Access code 657-2569. Call in, fam.
Yeah.
Yes, I have a proposal. Cash payments.
To who?
To descendants of those enslaved.
Where?
In America?
Oh, okay. So I'm glad you said that, Kim, because you led to my next point. So the chair also proposed that all the proposals have at least three things at, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things at minimum. So all of the proposals need to have actually a specific proposal, right? So like, what are you asking for specifically, right? Okay. So I guess cash payments counts there. You got that check, right? Okay. What we call a cost analysis. So I'll wait for the cost analysis, Kim. I'm sure that's coming via the email as well.
Working on it.
Plan. Okay. So I will expect the attachment with the implementation plan also. And then an explanation on how the proposals fit into the categories of reparations that we just talked about. So one or more of those 5 categories. I guess it fits in the compensation category, right? But how does it do that, right? So the chair also proposed that all of the actual proposals have at least those 4 or 5 components to them, and that's what we should see from groups and interested parties and community folks as well in advance of every single one of the task force meetings, if this is the plan that actually happens. Okay, I want to push forward because I want to get this done before 9:30, and I can do the rest in 2 minutes. If there are, and I do want to say in the chat, thank you. Yeah, no worries. LeVar, hope I'm saying your name right. Yeah, no problem, man. This is why we're here, and we're happy to share the information. So thank you for watching, and thank everybody for watching too. Those who are watching now and will watch later. All right. So also at the meeting, the task force talked about some community engagement plans and strategies specifically outside of what the chair just talked about, right? Because I just gave you like a couple of pieces of what the chair proposed. She proposed actually what we should talk about at every single meeting to Chair Camilla Moore. And that's stuff that we're going to come back to here, not tonight, but we're definitely going to come back to that. But what else was talked about was how else the task force should be engaging with the community. And Dr. Cheryl Grills, one of the task force members, had a plan that she presented, and Lisa Holder had a plan that she presented as well. A couple of key points from Dr. Grills' plan: one, that it centers the UCLA Ralph Bunche Center as the sort of coordinator / facilitator of all of the community engagement that goes on, and then basically all of the groups and other parties would connect to the task force through the Ralph Bunche Center for the community engagement part of the work that it does. Another big part of what Dr. Grills proposed, or another big part of her plan, were what she called listening sessions, or public listening sessions. But what we were calling in our plan, because our group, CJEC, Coalition for a Just and Equitable California, we presented ideas that we gathered from you, right? From you people here who are watching, and those online and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, right? We gathered information and ideas about community engagement from you. So we called them public comment only meetings, but these are specifically listening sessions. So these would be a series of listening sessions above and beyond the specific public meetings that would happen all across California, and would be just to get public comment, public testimony, etc. Last thing to say on Lisa Holder's plan, right? Just to wrap this up, a couple of key points. One of the biggest points is that she wants, and she proposed that there be a specific person hired to actually do the specific community engagement work, and that then they work with the California Department of Justice to actually create a specific community engagement plan, and there would be areas for grassroots organizations to connect through that work too, but that the community engagement work be actually managed by some folks whose job it is just to do that. Okay, those are some key points that came out of the conversation at the last California Reparations Task Force meeting. CJECofficial.org, where you can get more info. CJEC on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and here, because you can ask questions here too. Okay. Oof. I tried.
Boom.
So, Chris, being that many of us in the community are not economists, the cost analysis part, I mean, what do we do to come up with the cost analysis for our proposals? Just us regular community members that want to submit a proposal.
You do homework. Yeah, see, it ain't. Yeah, now it's getting real. Okay.
All right. I need to holler at you about something. I need to holler about something.
So I think what you're going to see from us is that we are going to be, having a lot of conversations about this, right? And so I would say for anybody who's interested in actually like putting together proposals to submit to the task force, definitely connect with us at CJEC, but like also think about the fact that there have been people who have been doing a lot of great work around all of the things that we've been talking about. So like, connecting to people who have already done proposals and, talking to them, right? Maybe submitting them as people who might want to talk to the task force, right? There are all kinds of ways to get proposals because all we care about are good proposals, right? We don't really care where they come from, right? So like we want the best proposal. Now we know they're going to come from everywhere, right? So we want to look everywhere, but we're not going to say, we don't want this proposal because it's not from there, right? So but definitely connect with us at CJEC because we're going to have a lot more to say about that specifically.
All right, connect with CJEC. And so we will get on with our program tonight. We're going to be talking about voting rights, so we know who to vote for to get our reparations. Okay, Congresswoman Joyce Beatty arrested while protesting on Capitol Hill. The group entered the Hart Senate office building, singing spirituals and chanted phrases related to protecting voter rights, such as free the vote, end the filibuster, and fight for justice. Capitol Police officers arrested Beatty and 8 other protesters, binding their hands with zip ties. According to a statement posted on Twitter by Capitol Police, the protesters were warned 3 times to stop before they were arrested for violating a DC law that bars crowding, obstructing, or incommoding and disallows demonstrators to resume engaging in a demonstration after being instructed by law enforcement officers to cease engaging in a demonstration. Buildings in the Capitol complex are still closed to the public, but members of staff are allowed to bring guests inside. And we'll stop right there. You could screenshot it if you want to read up on that later, or check out CBS News is where it looks like that story came from. So, do you think they told the insurrectionists to stop 3 times? Because they didn't get arrested. So maybe they didn't get the order to stop. Is that what could have happened?
I know, right?
Yeah, what a tangled web we weave. So, one, I want to thank actually the people who actually stood up in Congress, and we're going to have a discussion about how important this is and what this means to what happened in 2022 and 2024, and also what it means for Black folks politically, because there's a lot to say here, right? And a lot not like what you would usually hear kind of say, right? So I do want to just start and say, I do thank the folks in Congress who stood up. Representative Beatty, right, who is chair of the CBC, I believe, as well. And I also want to say, just on what you just said, Kim, about the January 6th rioters. Remember, right now, we are like in the beginning parts of what is like a January 6th commission. Like the Congress is putting together a January 6th commission right now, and there's a lot of fighting going on around that. So there is, this is definitely something that people are going to be talking about, and I'm talking about the January 6th thing here right now, from now until 2022, and that connects right with what we're talking about in terms of voter stuff, right? Because why were those people there on January 6th, right? What were they being told? That something was wrong with the voting, right? Something was wrong with the voting. The election was stolen. That is what was being said, and so they believed that. So now we have, in response to that, and I'm sure you're going to talk about this too. We're all going to talk about this. You had, in response to what was being said about the voting in 2020, you had all of these Republican legislatures and states actually start creating anti-voting legislation. Now they would say this is legislation to protect voting, and no, this is not anti-voting legislation. This is legislation to make it safer and more secure, right? In response to what, right? What is this response to? What is this in response to, right? Excuse me. So just a little bit of context, because that's the backdrop. That's the stuff that brings us close to today, 6 to 9 months later, where we have Congress and the Democrats in Congress putting the voting rights bills up for vote, or up for at least consideration, and a lot happening around that leading up to what we have today. So let me stop there, because that's a lot.
Yeah, we're going to get deeper, bro. Wait and see.
All right. Also looks like women risk arrest while protesting voting rights at U.S. Capitol. Women march on the Capitol on July 19th, 2021, calling for more protections for voting rights. The march was coordinated by the Poor People's Campaign. Do we know if anyone did actually get arrested there, or they just risking it all for the rights to vote? All right. In other news, Texas House Republicans vote to track down absent Democrats and arrest them if necessary. A showdown in the Texas House was locked into place Tuesday after the chamber voted overwhelmingly to send law enforcement after Democrats who left the state a day earlier in protest of GOP priority elections legislation. More than 50 House Democrats left Monday for Washington, D.C. to deny the chambers a quorum, the minimum number of lawmakers needed to conduct business, as it takes up voting restrictions and other Republican priorities in special session. That agenda set by Governor Greg Abbott includes House Bill 3 and Senate Bill 1, the election legislation at hand that would make a number of changes to Texas voting system, such as banning drive-through and 24-hour voting options, and further restricting the state's vote by mail rules. Over the weekend, both House and Senate committees advanced the election bills.
All right, Chris,
on that one? Yeah, they are actually talking about rounding up the Democrats and arresting them.
Yeah, I mean, and they'll, I don't know if they'll do that. That's probably a threat. And the Democrats in Texas, that's obviously, and it's obviously a play on obviously the rules, right? Because they need a quorum. So if you deny them a quorum, meaning if they don't have enough people there, then they can't do business. And this is how deep it's getting, right? And Texas is definitely a point of interest and of special interest, because of all of the things that are going on with Texas, right? The fact that Texas is becoming less majority white, right? And the fact that Texas is voting more and more less Republican over time, right? And that is it's a huge state, right? And it's a hugely symbolic state also. And this is something that, and I don't expect them to be arresting nobody, but this is, I mean, it makes for good headlines. They'll come to some resolution soon, but this is how deep it gets.
All right, so let's go into what's going on and why everybody's up in arms. So HR 1 for the People Act of 2021, it's to expand Americans' access to the ballot box, reduce the influence of big money in politics, strengthen ethic rules for public servants, and implement other anti-corruption measures for the purpose of fortifying our democracy and for the other purposes, being enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled. So, Chris, I don't know if you want to elaborate on this, but basically this, and we'll go into it further as we get into it, kind of the history of the Voting Rights Act and why this is actually somewhat, or in my opinion, once I did, more research, why this is actually important. But
yeah,
to it different.
Yeah, so it's HR 1, right? And so having HR 1 is important because it's a symbolic number. It means that it was the first bill introduced, so it's like what the first highest priority on whoever controlled the Congress, right? So in this case the Democrats, and this is. So I tweeted about this, and for those of you who saw my Twitter, saw this, and it got a pretty good response actually. I have mixed feelings about some of this because one, I kind of feel like it sucks that like in 2021 we're like having to have these voting rights bills, right? Now I know that the struggle to keep the rights that we had to fight for is an ongoing, lifelong struggle, but it does kind of suck, doesn't it? That like the people in Congress have to get like arrested. Like, I mean, like, doesn't it feel like weird to you that like this is 2021? Does it say we failed? Right? Like, because what are we still doing? Fighting for the like having to fight so hard. I mean, and let's keep it real. The Democrats didn't have their own votes for this for the People Act, right? It got through the House, I believe, but the Senate killed it. And the Senate Democrats blamed the Senate Republicans, but the Senate Democrats, quiet as kept, didn't have the votes for their own voting rights bill. And they think we're stupid and didn't know that, right? But we saw the reports coming out days before the votes about Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema and the other conservative right-wing Democrats, really, who did not want to vote for the Senate version of this bill. So we have a problem, right? We have a big problem. And last thing to say on this is, some of this also kind of feels like this is being mixed in with the voter registration efforts of the Democratic Party. And that is something that I think we have to keep an eye on, that there's not a blurring of the lines, right? That we're not using this as a way to just register Democrats for the next election, right? And I'm talking about using this as a communications and organizing a political tool, not necessarily the content of the legislation, which I think are important, like you're saying, and I think we want to dig into.
All right. So I guess let's dig into the Voting Rights Act of 1965. I'm not going to read the whole thing. So if you guys want to do your research on it, but this is what we're fighting for right now, or at least people who want to put priority on it. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 is a landmark piece of federal legislation in the U.S. that prohibits racial discrimination in voting. It was signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson during the height of the Civil Rights Movement on August 6, 1965, and Congress later amended the act 5 times to expand its protections, designed to enforce the voting rights guaranteed by the 14th and 15th Amendments to the United States Constitution. The act sought to secure the right to vote for racial minorities, i.e. Black people specifically, throughout the country, especially in the South. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, the act is considered to be the most effective piece of federal civil rights legislation ever enacted in the country. It is also one of the most far-reaching pieces of civil rights legislation in U.S. history. So let's go to, I guess, Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act. All right, so this is important because, as we'll see, basically Section 4 from my research, in a nutshell, got removed from the current Voting Rights Act. So, because as you'll see by certain judges, they decided to get rid of this piece section. So let's go into it. So Section 4A says, to ensure the right of citizens of the United States to vote is not denied or abridged on account of race or color, no citizen shall be denied the right to vote in any federal, state, or local election because of his failure to comply with any test or device in any state with respect to which the determinations have been made under subsection B, or in any political subdivision with respect to which such determinations have been made as a separate unit, unless the United States District Court for the District of Columbia in any action for a declaratory judgment brought by such state or subdivision against the United States has been determined that no such test or device has been used during the 5 years preceding the filing of the action for the purpose or with the effect of denying or abridging the right to vote on or account of race or color. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so Section 4B, this says the provisions of subsection A shall apply in any state or any political subdivision of state which, 1, the Attorney General determines maintain on November 1st, 1964, any test or device, and with respect to which. And I just want to highlight, just keep those words in mind, the Attorney General, because that's going to play a big role in the next coming slides. 2, the director of the census determines that less than 500 percentum of the persons of voting age residing therein were registered on November 1st, 1964, or that less than 50% of such persons voted in the presidential election of November 1964. So this basically, to sum up everything, a lot of these ideas and concepts were built around 1964 and 1965. So as we go further with moving up to around like 2013, I believe, basically they said all these ideas and concepts were no longer valid. So let's go to the next one. Okay, so pretty much if you want to read it further, this is just for informational purposes. Parts C and E, it talks about various things in terms of the voting rights, where you can go ahead and vote and so forth. So let's go on to the section 5. Okay, so let's get into this one. Whenever a state or a political subdivision with respect to which the prohibitions set forth in Section 4A are in effect shall enact or seek to administer any voting qualification or prerequisite to voting, or standard practice or procedure with respect to voting different from that in force or effect on November 1st, 1964. Such state or subdivision may institute an action in the United States District Court for the District of Columbia for a declaratory judgment that such qualification, prerequisite, standard, practice, or procedure does not have the purpose and will not have the effect of denying or abridging the right to vote on account of race or color, and until the court enters such judgment, no person shall be not denied the right to vote for failure to comply with such qualification, prerequisite, standard, practice, or procedure. All right, so let's go to the next one. All right, so Chris, was there anything before we moved on?
So yeah, there's a lot to say, but I don't want to stop the flow of the slides here. But some of this, we're gonna have to break some of this down for the family, in like some more, right? And like, come back to a lot of this, because there's a lot definitely packed into like all of that, and I definitely want to break this down more.
Okay. All right. So maybe we'll go through the whole slide presentation and then, give it further context. So I think what's important here is that, because like I wasn't even, to be honest with you, really wasn't too aware, honestly, of some of the reasons why people are so upset right now with what's going on. So what happened in 2013, there was a court case, a Supreme Court case, Shelby County versus Holder. Now, I don't know if some people in the audience or in the comment section, I don't know if you guys can comment, but does anybody know which county they're referring to regarding Shelby? Which state? Don't say nothing, Chris.
I know what it is.
And do you know
down in the South?
and does anybody know what Attorney General was referring? I kind of gave that one up. Okay, so let's do this. Shelby County versus Holder. So we'll go with that, and then later on in the slides, it will talk about which county they're referring to and which holder they're referring to, because I think this is important in terms of giving us a broad scope of the Black experience, especially from the American descendants of slavery. This kind of all ties into itself in terms of.
Hey, Yamoy, just to say real quick here. So just a couple of things. One, we're definitely gonna break this down more for the family and talk about how it ties into like what's going on like right now with the other bill. I'm sure that's we're going toward that. But just to point out a couple of things in that middle paragraph there.
Mm-hmm.
So one, what happened in 2013 was that the Supreme Court said that part of the 65 Voting Rights Act was unconstitutional. Okay? Part of it. Okay? Specifically, a certain part that was, figuring out, how do you apply, some of the rules of what was in the Voting Rights Act, and it said that it was unconstitutional because it was pretty old. It was actually too old to be effective right now. And so just to say that, and then also to say that you also see in that middle paragraph there, right? And again, we're talking about the Voting Rights Act. Just to give you some context here, because it's important to understand this before you try to understand what's in that HR 1, right? That HR 1. A lot of times we talk about the Voting Rights Act, we talk about the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Voting Rights Act of 1965, right? But a lot of us, don't really know what was in a lot of that stuff, right? And so some of us are hearing this for the first time now. We're also hearing and knowing that the courts interpret the law over time. So just because it said something in 65, the court's going to tell us what it means now, and actually in every year, really, or in the whole time between 65 and now. So I'll stop there and let's keep going.
Yeah, great, excellent point, Chris. Excellent point. I think you pretty much summed it up. So let's go on to the next slide. All right. So in this one, the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965 to ensure state and local governments do not pass laws or policies that deny American citizens the equal right to vote based on race. On June 25th, 2013, the Supreme Court swept away a key provision of this landmark civil rights law in Shelby County versus Holder. In April 2010, Shelby County, Alabama, ding, 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 filed suit against a federal court in Washington, D.C. to declare Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act unconstitutional. Section 5 is a key part of the Voting Rights Act, requiring certain jurisdictions with a history of discrimination to submit any proposed changes in voting procedures to the U.S. Department of Justice or a federal district in court in D.C. before it goes into effect, to ensure that change would not harm minority voters. In September 2011, the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia upheld the constitutionality of Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. And in May 2012, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit agreed with the District Court with Section 5 was constitutional. Shelby County appealed the ruling to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court agreed to take the case in November 2012.
Hey, you more? Can I say one thing real quick?
Yeah, go ahead, bro.
So keep in mind what you're hearing, family. You're hearing how people were not happy with us getting the vote, okay? And they've been fighting it since '65. Challenging it in court this year. Challenging the Shelby County versus Holder was not. Trust me, when you listen to some of those Supreme Court tapes, they're citing precedent from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. Right? They're citing old court cases where they've had to deal with this over and over and over again. Actually, some states have to like check in with the federal government before they do anything with their voting rights because they were so bad before 1965. And a lot of this is about those states. Right, the states like Alabama, who have had to, over many years, continually just check in with the federal government before they did anything with their voting laws, and obviously they don't like that, and obviously the other states didn't like that either, and a lot of people didn't like us getting the vote, and they have been, and this brings me to my first point. I actually answered my first question. Because I said in the beginning, doesn't it feel so bad that we have to have this voting rights fight, and then we're fighting segregation also, aka gentrification too? So like our two top priorities in 2021 as Black folks, right? Two of the top are like reparations, voting rights, and segregation. Okay, but why does it feel like that? The reason it does is because of what we're looking at right here. That the people who didn't want it to happen for us been fighting. So we have to fight too.
Yeah. All right. So the article continues. On June 25th, 2013, the Supreme Court ruled that the coverage formula in Section 4B, which we briefly read, of the Voting Rights Act, which determines which jurisdictions are covered by Section 5, is unconstitutional because it is based on an old formula. As a practical matter, this means that Section 5 is unoperable until Congress enacts a new coverage formula, which I believe, Chris, this is where this new 2021 People's Act is supposed to do, right? It's supposed to cover this thing that was basically revoked. Is that your interpretation?
It's supposed to deal with a lot of that. And actually, let's talk to the family real quick because the voting rights bill in Congress actually split up into two. So instead of just the HR 1, there's now an HR 4, I believe, also. So HR 4, and these are the bills that are supposed to deal with what happened, not just with what happened in 2013, which was a huge blow, right, and a big deal. And I don't know if folks can remember back to 2013, 7 years ago. Like, I don't know if we had even allowed to talk about this. This was in the Obama administration. I think that's Attorney General Eric Holder, right? In the Holder, right, part. So yeah, but generally the answer is yeah, but it's not just that. It's also in response to a lot of what we've seen over the last 6 months. And again, this is what I was talking earlier about what was happening in the first 6 months of this year, where you had a lot of states like Texas and elsewhere, Georgia specifically, for real, right, doing all these Voter Rights Act laws, quote unquote.
So speaking of states, so here are some of the states that were covered at that time by Section 5. So obviously you can see, surprise, looks like California was in the mix, Arizona, not surprised, Texas, and as you can see, many of the southern states. Woohoo! Southern hospitality. So after that decision was made, looks like some of those rights that were in Section 5 and 4B specifically were no longer applicable. So now here we are. People doing the same thing, basically what they were doing back in the 60s.
Yeah, depressing. Right?
So
just depressing.
You take 8 steps or take one step forward, you take 8 steps back, right?
Well, you just got to know that, like, our history here is like we always got to fight. Like, we always are on go mode. Like, we always got to be in fight mode, and like because and we always have to have like our political armies, like, at the ready, and because we're always in a fight, and the opposition to us being full citizens is alive and well and fighting.
Yep. So let's go to a little history actually about Shelby County, Alabama. Let's see. You want to? Yeah, thanks, Kim. So a little history about Shelby County, where it looks like Shelby County, Alabama was the one who was involved in this case. Was created by an act of the Alabama Territorial General Assembly that was approved February 7th, 1818, preceding Alabama's statehood by almost 2 years. The county was originally one of the largest in the state, but the legislature carved out portions of Shelby County in successive acts when creating St. Clair, Jefferson, Talladega, and Chilton counties. It was named in honor of Isaac Shelby, who passed away in 1826 and born in 1750. So I guess let's go on to who Isaac Shelby was. So Isaac Shelby, born 1750, died in 1826, was the first and fifth governor of Kentucky and served in the state legislatures of Virginia and North Carolina. He was also a soldier in Lord Dunmar's War, the American Revolutionary War, and the War of 1812. While governor, he led the Kentucky militia in the Battle of the Thames, an action that was rewarded with a Congressional Gold Medal. Counties in 9 states and several cities and military bases have been named in his honor. His fondness for John Dickinson's The Liberty Song is believed to be the reason Kentucky adopted the state motto, United we stand, divided we fall. In 1820, Isaac Shelby was stricken with paralysis in his right arm and leg. He died of a stroke on July 18, 1826, at his home in Lincoln County. Shelby was a slave owner, surprise, surprise, and left slaves to his children in his will. He was buried on the grounds of his estate, Travelers Rest. The state erected a monument over his grave in 1827. In 1952, the Shelby family cemetery was given to the state government and became the Isaac Shelby Cemetery State Historic Site. All right. So that was Shelby County versus, if I'm correct, he would be considered a descendant of American U.S. slavery, chattel slavery. Yes, Chris? Anybody? Eric Holder? Or would I be wrong about that?
Not sure.
Okay. So. Not
sure. I mean, in this case, it wouldn't matter because he did file the suit, right? He was the Attorney General who filed the suit on behalf of the people of the United States. And by the way, the Attorney General, is supposed to be, I think, like the people's lawyer, right? Like supposed to represent the United States.
Right. So let's give a little background on Eric Holder. So remember, this was Shelby County versus Holder. Let's see. Eric Hampton Holder Jr. is an American lawyer who served as the 82nd Attorney General of the United States from 2009 to 2015. Holder served in the administration of President Barack Obama, was the first African American to hold the position of U.S. Attorney General. In this case, Shelby County versus Holder, he was the petitioner in the case. Respondents are Eric H. Holder Jr. in his official capacity as Attorney General of the United States, and I guess Earl Cunningham, Harry Jones, Albert Jones, Ernest Montgomery, Anthony Vines, William Walker, Bobby Pearson, and a couple of others in the advancement of colored people, and Bobby Lee Harris were also respondents and in this case as well. All right, so John Roberts, I guess he was one of the, I don't know, Chris, what do they call them? The deciding factors in people who make rules and so forth. And what do they call it? The tiebreakers?
He's a judge, man. He's the chief judge. So he was the vote that made the decision go the way that so you could call it the deciding vote.
The deciding vote. Thank you. So the deciding vote. So yeah, that's him. Chief Judge John Roberts, born in 1955, is an American lawyer and jurist who has served as the 17th Chief Justice of the United States since 2005. He's authored the majority opinion in several landmark cases, including Shelby County versus Holder, National Federation of Independent Business versus Sebelius, King versus Bureau, and Department of Commerce versus New York, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he presided over the first impeachment trial of Donald Trump in early 2020. So yeah, so he was the deciding factor. All right, next. So Clarence Thomas. So this is while they were deciding what was going to happen with the vote, the 1965 Voting Rights Act. This was his opinion. In his concurring opinion, Justice Clarence Thomas argued that Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act is unconstitutional in addition to Section 4. He wrote that the blatant discrimination against certain voters that Section 5 was intended to prohibit is no longer evident. Without such extraordinary circumstances, Congress cannot constitutionally justify placing the burden of Section 5 on the states in question. All right, I think that's it, right, family? So I wanted to give you guys just a summary of the Voting Rights Act so we can kind of understand what's going on, because oftentimes, sometimes we just get into things and we just jump like, oh, let's what are we, instead of just holding back saying, okay, why are we getting involved? Is it even important getting involved? And that's the title of the show, voting rights, and priorities. I mean, is this one of our priorities? I mean, should we even care about it? I mean, should we even be focused on voting? Because technically we could still vote, but I guess with what other people are saying is no, I mean, some of what's happening right now is making it very hard, for Black people to vote specifically, and other poor people, etc.
Yeah, so we have to come back to this because we have to talk about what's in HR 1, right? And what's in HR 4 specifically, and how that relates to what we just said. But this was definitely a good background, because we're gonna need this information before we can talk about that for sure.
And the red states here, these are the states that are complicit in voter suppression. Is that what this is telling me?
So I believe those are the states that were covered by Section 5 of the voter rights of the 65 Voting Rights Act at the time. So these were the states that back in '65 had to basically, like I said, check in. So and this is why we have to come back to this, because what Section 5 was saying, a lot of what Section 5 was saying is that, hey, because these states was doing such bad stuff that in the future, if y'all want to do anything with y'all voting, y'all got to check in with the federal government first and see if it's okay first, because of y'all record, right? And so these are the states, right?
And Chris, isn't that
and you can see the state that we sitting in.
I know, I was going to say
right there,
California,
California.
Right, it's right there, which kind of surprises me. I mean, I guess they've turned things around, because it couldn't get much easier to vote in California unless they, cast the vote for you, which seems like what they want to do these days.
Yeah. There's and some of that's some of what was being argued again by folks in Alabama was, hey, this was based on an old Alabama, and Alabama ain't like this no more. And you heard Judge Thomas's concurrence, what they call a concurring opinion, meaning, hey, I agree with the way this is being decided. And that was him basically saying, I agree. I'm agreeing that these parts of the Voting Rights Act were constitutional. And you heard in his opinion, what was read by Yamoya was, and I'm glad you read this part, bro. He said that there is no need for this anymore because they don't do this anymore, right? And the racism that was going on in voting is not there anymore. And if you agree with that, then that's how you voted. And if you don't agree with that, then you don't like this decision.
Well, in some states, they do make it very difficult to vote. I mean, you see the lines wrapped around the corner. You know, people had to go out during, you know, COVID pandemic and be in crowds to vote and things like that. So it's definitely needed in some places.
Yeah, there's something like, so again, there's a lot in, like, let's definitely come back to this, because in HR1, there's a lot of, like, again, a lot of this is in response to, so some of this is in response to what we've seen over the last few months, right? And this is more about like how things happened in 2020 also, and like the kind of voting things that we saw. For example, something that we do here or can do here in California now, which is called like vote harvesting, what we call vote harvesting. Basically, you go out and you get people's permission to like collect their votes for them, and then like drop them off, and it has to be, you know, like official, et cetera. But like, you know, there are some challenges to some of that stuff, right? And other stuff too. So we definitely have to talk about like what this bill and not getting HR1 done will mean to voting in 2022 and 2024. What can you do? What can't you do? How much more ID are you going to need now? Right? You know, if you look back at the 2020 challenges, I thought they were racist as hell, because to be honest with you, every part that the Republicans challenged pretty much were like, you know, black areas, like black voting areas, or like the many of the places that they challenged, most of them actually were like where black people voted a lot. And so we got a problem.
Yes, we do. So before we get out of here, I want everybody, unless King, you had something else to say.
I know he said we have a problem, and I'm just thinking Houston, Texas got a problem.
Houston,
Show.
you have a problem. Word up. So yeah, family. If you can, please, right now, we're gonna put in the chat here. Yeah, subscribe to the show. The show called The Political Goat Show. I think we have a slide somewhere around here. Where is it at? Where's that? Yeah, The Political Show. Please, the subscription link is in there. Go check it out. We're getting deep. Got some, you know, good hosts and so forth coming out. Try to be strategy, solution oriented as well on that. And because this is very important, you know, when we talk about voting rights, because, and that's another thing. I mean, you hear some people in the community, you know, they're talking about like, oh, voting, you know, is not important. You know, who cares about voting? You can't galvanize, you know, there's not enough black people to do anything anyway. So let's just not even strategize. Let's just try to get our money together and do what we need to do without even like trying to have any strategy at all. So it's really unfortunate, you know, that we aren't more engaged in the process to galvanize ourselves in some form. Because if we ain't got the money, then we got to galvanize some way. And, you know, if we all galvanize, have a strategy, we can definitely turn things around, you know, at least make some impact some way. I mean, we did it in this election. I think one thing, and I don't even think it's, and I could be wrong about this, but I don't even think it's necessarily like individual people. I think the ones who were, I guess, quote unquote, speaking for black people, you know, didn't ask for nothing, you know, when they voted for Joe Biden, you know, and that was an unfortunate situation. There was nothing asked. So here we are, you know, trying to fight our way through this not only pandemic, but now this egregious crime again, you know, against black people specifically. So, you know, we're just going to keep trying to do the work. We appreciate everybody from coming through. I know you guys doing the work. You're doing the work by being here, getting educated. And I'm sure there's some things, you know, hopefully in the future, if you guys have, you know, we want to hear you guys' thoughts. And I'm sure you guys can bring some wisdom, you know, to the platform as well. This is why it's a community call. Call in, let us know your thoughts. And, you know, what y'all got to say on that one before we break out.
I think we said it. I mean, get out there, make the ancestors proud. They fought way too hard for our right to vote for us to waste it. And with that, ETM is out.